The rain was coming down in sheets that Tuesday evening in Portland, Oregon. I remember every detail of that moment. The way the windshield wipers struggled against the downpour, the smell of wet asphalt through my slightly open window, and the soft jazz playing on the radio. I was driving home from my book club meeting, thinking about the heated discussion we'd had about second chances in life. Little did I know that my own second chance was just moments away, wrapped in tragedy and pain. The intersection of Morrison and 82nd Avenue had always made me nervous. Too many lanes, too many distracted drivers rushing through yellow lights. As I approached, my light was green, and I pressed gently on the gas pedal of my reliable Honda Civic. That's when I saw it. A massive pickup truck barreling through the red light on my right. Time slowed to a crawl, the way they say it does in movies. But this wasn't fiction. This was my life about to shatter into 1,000 pieces. The impact came from the passenger side, a thunderous crash of metal against metal that seemed to echo through my bones. My car spun like a child's toy, and I felt my body slam against the door, then whip forward as the seatbelt caught me. Glass exploded around me in a glittering shower, and then there was silence. Complete, terrifying silence. I don't remember losing consciousness, but I must have. Because the next thing I knew, there were voices around me. Urgent, professional voices cutting through the fog in my head. "Ma'am, can you hear me? Stay with us. We're going to get you out of there." My vision was blurry, and every breath felt like knives in my chest. I tried to speak, but only a weak moan escaped my lips. The jaws of life screamed as they worked to pry open what was left of my car door. I could feel warm liquid, blood, I realized with growing panic, trickling down my forehead. My left arm hung at an odd angle, and when I tried to move it, white-hot pain shot through my entire body. Fear crept in then, real fear about whether I would survive this night. "We've got her!" someone called out as strong hands carefully lifted me onto a stretcher. The rain felt cold against my face, mixing with my tears. As they wheeled me toward the ambulance, I caught glimpses of the scene. My car, twisted beyond recognition. The pickup truck with its front end crumpled, and what seemed like dozens of emergency responders working with practiced efficiency in the stormy night. The ambulance ride to OHSU Hospital was a blur of medical terminology. I didn't understand. The paramedic, a kind-faced man probably in his 50s, kept talking to me, asking me questions to keep me conscious. "What's your name, honey?" "Sarah," I managed to whisper. "Sarah Coleman." "Well, Sarah, you're going to be just fine. We're almost there." But I didn't feel fine. I felt broken, scared, and utterly alone. At 52, I had built a quiet, predictable life. I worked as a librarian at the downtown branch, lived in the same apartment for 15 years, and had a small circle of friends from book club and my yoga class. I wasn't married, had never found the right person, or maybe I had never been brave enough to really look. Now, lying on that stretcher with pain radiating through every part of my body, I wondered if I would ever have the chance to live differently. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The emergency room doors burst open, and suddenly I was surrounded by a flurry of activity. Nurses in colorful scrubs moved around me with purpose, checking my vital signs and starting IV lines. The bright fluorescent lights made everything feel surreal, like I was watching someone else's emergency from outside my own body. That's when I first saw her. Dr. Elena Rodriguez appeared at my side like an angel of mercy. Her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her brown eyes focused and intense as she examined me. She was probably in her early 40s with laugh lines around her eyes that suggested she smiled often, though her expression now was all business. "Hello, Sarah. I'm Dr. Rodriguez, and I'm going to take very good care of you tonight." Her voice was warm but authoritative, the kind of voice that made you believe everything would be okay. She had a slight accent, perhaps Mexican or Central American, that made her words sound like music even in the chaos of the emergency room. She examined me. Her hands were gentle but sure, checking for injuries with a thoroughness that was both professional and somehow comforting. "You've been through quite an ordeal," she said, making notes on her tablet. "We're going to get some x-rays and run a few tests, but I want you to know that you're safe now. We're going to fix you up." The next few hours were a haze of tests, x-rays and procedures. My left arm was broken in 2 places. I had 3 cracked ribs, a concussion, and more cuts and bruises than I could count. But Dr. Rodriguez was there through it all, explaining each step, holding my uninjured hand when the pain became overwhelming, and speaking to me like I was a person, not just another case. "The surgery on your arm went beautifully," she told me the next morning, her smile genuine and reassuring. "You're going to make a full recovery, Sarah. It will take time, and there will be challenges, but you're stronger than you know." As I drifted off to sleep in my hospital bed, pain medication making the world soft around the edges, I found myself thinking not about the accident, but about the doctor who had saved me. There was something about Dr. Elena Rodriguez that made me feel safe in a way I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. The next 3 days in the hospital passed in a fog of medication, interrupted sleep, and the constant parade of nurses checking on me. My arm was in a cast from my wrist to my shoulder, making even the simplest tasks impossible. I had never felt so helpless, so dependent on others for basic human needs. The physical pain was manageable with medication, but the emotional weight of what had happened was crushing me. Dr. Rodriguez visited me twice a day during her rounds, always professional, but with a warmth that seemed to reach beyond the typical doctor-patient relationship. She would sit on the edge of my bed, something I noticed other doctors didn't do, and really listen when I talked about my fears and frustrations. "I don't know how I'm going to manage at home," I confided in her on my 3rd day. "I live alone, and with this cast, I can't even open a jar of soup." The vulnerability in my voice surprised me. I had always prided myself on my independence, but the accident had stripped that away, along with everything else. "We'll figure it out together," Dr. Rodriguez said, her hand briefly touching my uninjured arm. "That's what recovery is about, taking it one step at a time and accepting help when you need it. There's no shame in that, Sarah. In fact, it takes courage." When I was discharged on Friday afternoon, I felt terrified. The hospital had become a cocoon of safety, with Dr. Rodriguez checking on me regularly and nurses always nearby if I needed anything. Going back to my empty apartment felt like stepping into an abyss. My friend Janet from book club picked me up and helped me get settled at home. She had stocked my refrigerator with easy-to-prepare meals and arranged for a cleaning service to come while I was in the hospital. "The whole book club is going to take turns checking on you," she said, fussing over my pillows on the couch. "You're not going through this alone." But despite Janet's kindness and the support of my friends, I did feel alone. The silence in my apartment was oppressive, broken only by the ticking of the clock on my kitchen wall and the occasional sound of traffic outside. I found myself replaying the accident over and over, wondering what I could have done differently, feeling grateful to be alive but also strangely empty. My first follow-up appointment with Dr. Rodriguez was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I spent the weekend looking forward to it with an anticipation that surprised me. When Tuesday finally arrived, I took extra care getting dressed, choosing a blue blouse that brought out my eyes, something I hadn't bothered with in years. Dr. Rodriguez's office was in the medical building adjacent to the hospital, on the 7th floor with windows that looked out over the Willamette River. The view was spectacular, and I commented on it when she called me back from the waiting room. "It's one of the reasons I chose this office," she said, gesturing for me to sit in the chair beside her desk, rather than on the examination table. "I think healing happens better when you can see beauty. How are you feeling, Sarah?" "Really feeling. Not just the standard fine that patients usually give me. Her directness caught me off guard, and I found myself being more honest than I had planned. Scared, I admitted, and frustrated. I've always been independent, and now I need help opening a water bottle. I feel like the accident took away more than just my mobility. It took away who I am. Dr. Rodriguez nodded, her expression understanding. Trauma doesn't just affect our bodies, Sarah. It affects our sense of self, our confidence, our belief in our own strength. What you're feeling is completely normal, and it's part of the healing process too. She examined my arm, checking the movement in my fingers and asking about my pain levels. Her touch was gentle but thorough, and I found myself acutely aware of the warmth of her hands, the way she smelled like vanilla and something floral, the focused attention she gave to every aspect of my care. "Your bones are healing beautifully," she said, showing me the new x-rays. "But I'm concerned about your emotional recovery. Have you considered talking to someone? A counselor who specializes in trauma?" I bristled slightly. "I'm not crazy, Dr. Rodriguez. I'm just adjusting." "I never said you were crazy," she replied gently. "But trauma is real, Sarah, and it deserves the same attention and care as your physical injuries. Think of it as physical therapy for your emotional well-being." As I left her office that day, I realized I had been looking forward to seeing her, not just as my doctor, but as a person. There was something about Elena Rodriguez that drew me in. Her compassion, her intelligence, the way she seemed to see right through to the heart of things. It was a dangerous realization for a woman who had spent most of her life playing it safe. Over the next few weeks, my follow-up appointments became the highlights of my recovery. Dr. Rodriguez would spend far more time with me than necessary, asking about my daily life, my work at the library, my book club discussions. She told me about her own life too, how she had come to Oregon from California for her residency and stayed because she fell in love with the Pacific Northwest, how she volunteered at a free clinic on weekends, how she was learning to paint in her spare time. "I'm terrible at it," she laughed, showing me a photo on her phone of a painting she had done of Mount Hood. "But it's therapeutic. There's something about creating beauty, even imperfect beauty, that feeds the soul." I found myself thinking about her between appointments, wondering what she was doing, whether she was taking care of herself the way she took care of her patients. It was a strange feeling for someone who had lived such an emotionally guarded life. I told myself it was just gratitude, that it was natural to feel connected to the person who had saved your life, but deep down, I knew it was becoming something more. By my 6th week of recovery, the cast had been replaced with a removable brace, and I was finally able to return to work part-time at the library. The familiar smell of books and the quiet bustle of patrons felt like coming home, but I noticed that everything seemed different somehow. Colors appeared more vivid, conversations more meaningful, and I found myself appreciating small moments that I had previously taken for granted. My colleagues were wonderfully supportive, handling the heavier tasks while I eased back into my routine. But even surrounded by books and the comfortable rhythms of library work, my thoughts kept drifting to Dr. Rodriguez, Elena, as she had started insisting I call her during our appointments. "You seem different," my coworker Martha observed one afternoon as we were reshelving returns in the fiction section. Martha had worked at the library for nearly 30 years and had an uncanny ability to read people. Not just physically from the accident, but, I don't know, more alive somehow. I paused in my work, a copy of Jane Austen's Persuasion in my good hand. "I suppose a near-death experience changes your perspective," I said, though I knew that wasn't the whole truth. What I couldn't tell Martha, what I could barely admit to myself, was that I was falling in love with my doctor. Every appointment brought new layers of connection. Elena would ask about the books I was reading, and we discovered a shared passion for Latin American literature. She recommended authors I had never heard of, and I found myself eagerly reading their works, just to have something new to discuss with her. During one appointment, as she was checking my range of motion, Elena mentioned that she was struggling with loneliness in Portland. "It's hard to meet people when you work the hours I do," she said, manipulating my arm gently through various positions. "Most of my colleagues are married with families, and dating apps feel so artificial." My heart raced at this admission. "What kind of person are you looking for?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual while my pulse hammered in my throat. Elena paused in her examination, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "Someone genuine. Someone who reads books instead of just watching reality TV. Someone who's lived enough to know that perfect doesn't exist, but real connection does." She looked directly into my eyes as she said this, and I felt something electric pass between us. "That sounds like a rare combination," I managed to say, though my mouth had gone dry. "Rarer than you might think," she replied, then seemed to catch herself and return to the professional examination. "Your mobility is excellent, Sarah. You've been doing your physical therapy religiously, haven't you?" The moment passed, but the memory of her words lingered with me for days. I found myself analyzing every interaction, looking for signs that her interest in me might extend beyond the professional. When she laughed at my stories about difficult library patrons, when she asked about my weekend plans, when her hand lingered, just a moment longer than necessary during examinations. Were these signs of something more, or was I projecting my own feelings onto her professional kindness? The uncertainty was torture. At 52, I had never been in love like this. I had had relationships, even a few serious ones, but nothing that made me feel so completely vulnerable and alive at the same time. The irony wasn't lost on me. It had taken a near-fatal accident to wake me up to the possibility of really living. 3 weeks later, during what was supposed to be one of my final follow-up appointments, Elena delivered news that hit me like another collision. "Your recovery has been remarkable, Sarah. Better than I could have hoped for when I first saw you in the emergency room. I think we can space your appointments out to every 3 months now, just to monitor your long-term healing. Every 3 months." The words felt like a death sentence. How could I go 3 months without seeing her, without our conversations, without the warmth of her attention? Is that necessary?" I asked, trying not to sound as desperate as I felt. "I mean, shouldn't you monitor me more closely? What if there are complications?" Elena tilted her head, studying my face with those perceptive brown eyes. "Sarah, is everything okay? You seem upset by this news, and most patients are thrilled when I tell them they don't need to see me as often." I felt heat creep up my neck and into my cheeks. How could I explain that these appointments had become the most important parts of my weeks, that the thought of not seeing her regularly felt like losing something precious? "I guess I've gotten used to having you check on things," I said lamely. "It makes me feel secure." Elena was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was softer than usual. "Sarah, can I ask you something? And please be honest with me. How do you feel about me as your doctor? Are you comfortable with our professional relationship?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I wasn't sure I was ready to face. This was my chance, to be honest, to take the risk that had terrified me my entire adult life, or to retreat back into the safety of pretending that what I felt was just gratitude. "I trust you completely," I said finally. "You saved my life, Elena. More than that, you've helped me find parts of myself I didn't know existed. These appointments, they've been the best part of my recovery. Not because I need medical care, but because..." I stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "Because?" she prompted gently. I took a deep breath, feeling like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. "Because I look forward to seeing you in a way that has nothing to do with being your patient." The silence that followed was deafening. Elena's expression was unreadable, professional mask firmly in place. I immediately regretted my honesty, certain that I had crossed a line that would destroy even the professional relationship we had. "Sarah," she said finally, her voice carefully controlled, "I think we need to talk about this. But not here. Not in my office where I'm your doctor. What you're describing, it's complicated." My heart sank. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. I know it's inappropriate and I don't want to make you uncomfortable. Can we just pretend—" "No," Elena interrupted, and there was something in her voice that made me look up at her. "We can't pretend. Because if I'm being completely honest, these appointments have become the best part of my weeks, too." The coffee shop Elena suggested was a small, intimate place in the Pearl District called Common Grounds. I arrived 15 minutes early, my stomach a knot of anxiety and anticipation. I had changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on an emerald green sweater that Janet had always said brought out my eyes, paired with my best jeans and the ankle boots I had splurged on last Christmas, but rarely wore. When Elena walked through the door at exactly 2 p.m., my breath caught in my throat. She looked different outside of her medical setting. Younger, more relaxed, absolutely beautiful in dark jeans and a cream-colored cashmere sweater. Her hair was down, falling in gentle waves around her shoulders, and she wasn't wearing her white coat, obviously. But somehow without it, she seemed more real, more approachable, and infinitely more dangerous to my peace of mind. "Hi," she said, approaching my corner table with a tentative smile. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me like this. I wasn't sure you would." "Of course I would," I replied, standing to greet her, suddenly uncertain about whether to hug her or shake her hand or just sit back down. Elena solved the dilemma by leaning in for a brief, light hug that left me feeling dizzy from the scent of her perfume. We ordered our drinks, a caramel latte for me, black coffee for her, and settled into the comfortable chairs by the window. The late afternoon light filtered through the glass, casting golden highlights in Elena's dark hair and making her brown eyes look almost amber. "This is strange for me, Sarah," Elena began, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. "In 12 years of practicing medicine, I have never found myself in this situation. Professional boundaries exist for good reasons, and I've always maintained them without question." "I know," I said quickly, "and I don't want to put you in a difficult position. Maybe we should just let me finish," she said gently. "I've always maintained those boundaries without question. But then I met you. From that first night in the emergency room, there was something different. You weren't just another patient to me, and that scared me. My heart was beating so hard I was certain she could hear it across the small table." "Different how?" Elena took a sip of her coffee, seeming to gather her thoughts. "The way you handled your pain, not just the physical pain, but the fear and vulnerability. The way you asked about my paintings, remembered details about my life. The way you made me laugh even when you were clearly struggling. I found myself looking forward to your appointments in a way that was definitely not professional." "So what does that mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It means that as of today, I'm transferring your ongoing care to Dr. Peterson in orthopedics. He's excellent. You'll be in perfect hands for your follow-up appointments." Elena's words hit me like a physical blow, and she must have seen my face fall because she quickly continued. "I'm doing this because I can't be your doctor anymore, Sarah. Not when I have feelings for you that go far beyond professional concern." The words hung between us, shimmering with possibility and terrifying in their implications. "Elena," I said, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "Are you sure? I don't want you to compromise your career or your ethics for me." She turned her hand over, palm up, and interlaced our fingers. The simple touch sent electricity up my arm. "I've thought about nothing else for weeks. I've consulted colleagues, read ethics guidelines, even talked to a therapist. The consensus is clear. Once I'm no longer your treating physician, there's no professional barrier to us exploring whatever this is between us." "And what is this between us?" I asked, emboldened by the warmth of her hand in mine. Elena smiled, the first truly unguarded smile I had seen from her. I think it's the beginning of something that scares me and excites me in equal measure. I think it's two women who found each other in the most unexpected circumstances, and maybe that means something. We talked for over 2 hours, the conversation flowing as naturally as if we had known each other for years. Elena told me about growing up in a small town in New Mexico, the daughter of a teacher and a mechanic, how she had worked her way through college and medical school with a fierce determination to help people. I shared stories about my quiet childhood in Eugene, my love of books, and how the accident had made me realize how much of my life I had spent hiding from real connection. I've always been careful, I confessed, as the coffee shop began to empty. Around us, safe choices, predictable routines. I think I was so afraid of getting hurt that I never really let myself live. And now? Elena asked. I looked at her across the table. This brilliant, beautiful woman who had literally saved my life and was now offering to help me find a new one. Now I think I'm ready to be brave. When we finally left the coffee shop, the sun was setting, painting the Portland sky in shades of pink and gold. Elena walked me to my car, and we stood there for a moment in the parking lot, the air between us charged with possibility. So what happens now? I asked. Now I go home and officially transfer your medical care to Dr. Peterson, Elena said. And then, if you're interested, I would very much like to take you to dinner this weekend. Somewhere nice, where we can continue this conversation without any professional obligations between us. I would love that, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. Elena leaned closer, and for a moment I thought she might kiss me right there in the parking lot. Instead, she reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, her fingers lingering against my cheek. "Saturday at 7?" she asked. "Perfect," I whispered. As I drove home that evening, my reflection in the rearview mirror showed a woman I barely recognized. My eyes were bright, my cheeks flushed, and I was smiling with a joy I hadn't felt in decades. The accident that had seemed like the worst thing that could happen to me had led me to Elena, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The next morning, I called in sick to work, something I had never done unless I was actually bedridden with the flu. Instead, I spent the day getting my hair done, buying a new dress for Saturday night, and calling my sister in California to tell her about Elena. My sister Lisa, who had been worried about my lonely life for years, was beside herself with excitement. "Sarah," she said, her voice warm with happiness, "you sound like a completely different person, like you've finally woken up." Maybe I had. Maybe it had taken a collision with a pickup truck to shake me awake to the possibility of real love. And maybe, just maybe, the best part of my life was about to begin. Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that made Portland famous. Clear skies, golden light filtering through the turning maple trees, and that hint of wood, smoke in the air that promised cozy evenings ahead. I spent the afternoon getting ready with a care and attention I hadn't given to my appearance in years, choosing a deep burgundy dress that flattered my figure and made me feel confident and feminine. Elena had chosen Le Pigeon, an intimate French restaurant in the Alberta district, known for its exceptional food and romantic atmosphere. When I arrived, she was already seated at a corner table, looking stunning in a black dress that perfectly complemented her dark hair and golden skin. She stood as I approached, and the smile that spread across her face made my heart skip. "You look absolutely beautiful, Sarah," she said, kissing my cheek softly. The simple gesture felt natural and right, as if we had been greeting each other this way for years. "So do you," I replied, meaning it completely. "Thank you for choosing such a lovely place." The evening unfolded like a perfectly choreographed dance. We shared stories from our childhoods, laughed over tales of difficult professors in college, and discovered a shared love of hiking, old movies, and the kind of deep, meandering conversations that can last until dawn. Elena told me about her decision to become a doctor after watching her grandfather battle cancer, and how she had chosen emergency medicine because she loved the challenge of helping people in their darkest moments. "What about you?" she asked, as we shared a decadent chocolate dessert. "What made you fall in love with books and libraries?" I thought about the question, twirling my spoon in the rich chocolate mousse. I think books saved me when I was young. My parents divorced when I was 12, and it was messy and painful. Books became my refuge, my way of understanding that there were other worlds, other possibilities beyond whatever chaos was happening at home. "And you became a librarian to share that refuge with others?" Elena said, her voice soft with understanding. "I suppose I did, though I'm not sure I realized it at the time." I paused, studying her face in the candlelight. "What about you? Do you always fall for your patients?" I asked teasingly. Elena laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Never. Not once. In 12 years of practice. You're the exception to every rule I've ever had about professional boundaries and keeping my personal life separate from my work." "Good," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "I like being your exception." After dinner, Elena suggested, a walk along the waterfront, and we strolled hand in hand through Tom McCall Waterfront Park. The city lights reflected in the Willamette River, and a soft breeze carried the scent of roses from the nearby gardens. It felt like something out of a movie, too perfect to be real, yet absolutely, completely real. "Sarah," Elena said as we paused at the railing overlooking the water, "I want to be completely honest with you about something." My stomach clenched, with sudden anxiety. "What is it?" "I'm 51 years old, and I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. Not even close. It terrifies me and thrills me at the same time." She turned to face me, her hands coming up to cup my face, gently. "I know we've only just begun this, but I need you to know that for me, this isn't casual. This feels like something that could change my life." Relief and joy flooded through me in equal measure. "Elena," I whispered, "I was in that emergency, room dying, and you saved me. But somehow you're saving me again. In a completely different way. I've spent 52 years playing it safe, never really putting my heart on the line. You make me want to risk everything." When she kissed me, it was soft and tentative at first, then deeper as I responded. Standing there by the river, with the city lights sparkling around us, I felt like I was finally, truly alive for the first time in my life. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness I had never imagined possible. Elena and I fell into a rhythm of dinners, long walks, movie nights at her apartment, and lazy Sunday mornings reading the paper in bed. She met my book club friends, who adored her instantly, and I attended a hospital fundraiser as her date, meeting her colleagues and feeling proud to be on her arm. We had our challenges, of course. Elena's demanding schedule meant canceled dates and interrupted dinners when she was called in for emergencies. I struggled with insecurity sometimes, wondering if someone as accomplished and beautiful as Elena could really be happy with a quiet librarian. But every time doubt crept in, Elena would do something. Bring me flowers just because, call me during her break to hear my voice, or simply look at me with such genuine love that my fears would melt away. The accident that had seemed like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of the most beautiful chapter of my life. My physical scars faded, but more importantly, the emotional walls I had built around my heart crumbled completely. One evening in late spring, as we were walking through the Rose Garden in Washington Park, Elena stopped suddenly and turned to me with a serious expression. "Sarah, there's something I want to ask you," she said, her voice slightly nervous. My heart began to race. "What is it?" Elena took my hands in hers, looking directly into my eyes. "I know this might seem fast, and if it is, just tell me." but I've been thinking about this for weeks. I'm tired of spending nights apart. I'm tired of maintaining 2 apartments, when all I want is to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep in your arms every night. Elena, I breathed, hardly daring to hope she was saying what I thought she was saying. Move in with me, Sarah. Let's build a life together. Let's stop pretending that what we have is temporary or casual. I love you, and I want to spend whatever time we have left on this earth making you as happy as you've made me. Tears blurred my vision as I pulled her into my arms. Yes, I whispered against her hair. Yes, 1,000 times yes. I love you too, Elena Rodriguez. More than I ever thought it was possible to love another person. As we held each other, in the garden, surrounded by the most beautiful roses either of us had ever seen, I marveled at the strange and wonderful way life could surprise you. I had thought my story was winding down, that my chances for great love and adventure had passed me by. Instead, it had taken a terrible accident to wake me up to the possibilities that were still ahead of me. 6 months later, we moved into a beautiful craftsman house in the Hawthorne district, with a garden where Elena could practice her painting, and a sun-filled breakfast nook, perfect for reading the Sunday paper together. On quiet evenings, we would often talk about that rainy Tuesday night when a pickup truck ran a red light and changed both of our lives forever. Do you ever regret it? Elena asked me one night as we sat on our front porch swing, watching the sunset paint our neighborhood in shades of gold. The accident, the pain, all of it? I considered her question seriously, thinking about the months of physical therapy, the fear and vulnerability I had experienced, the way my entire world had been turned upside down in an instant. No, I said finally, taking her hand and bringing it to my lips. I don't regret a single moment. That accident didn't just save my life. It gave me a life worth living. It brought me you. Elena squeezed my hand, smiling that beautiful smile that still made my heart race after all these months. Then I guess we both got our miracle that night. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky above Portland, I reflected on how wrong I had been about my story being nearly over. At 52, I was just beginning the greatest adventure of my life, and I couldn't wait to see what came next. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.